Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today I'm going to be reviewing this new track from Dave Grohl, Play. Now I'm not, 100% sure if this one track is just a single or if it's being classified as an EP. I've seen some places listed as an EP, I've seen others just say it's a single. Not 100% sure, but it really doesn't matter all that much because it is just one track, so it doesn't really change how I'm going to be talking about it here in this review. But, maybe depending on more information I learn in the future, I might change the title of this video to reflect if it's an EP or a track or, whatever it is really. So this is like a track review, maybe an EP review. I don't know exactly what to classify it as, but it's a review for Play, pretty much, regardless of what to classify it as. This is a new track that Dave Grohl has put out, Dave Grohl being most well known as the frontman for the Foo Fighters, drummer for Nirvana, as well as contributing a lot to a bunch of other music projects throughout his career. The guy really has a quite prolific career, not just with his drumming, which appears across many projects, but also singing, guitar work, things like that have appeared, of course, on Foo Fighters projects, for example, probably most notably. And, the Foo Fighters are my favorite band. I think I've said that on this channel before. And I really like their work. I really like Dave Grohl and his work. So, of course, I'm going to be checking out a Dave Grohl track like this, especially a 20-minute long track. That seems to be pretty interesting. Now, here, Dave Grohl is doing all the instruments here on this one track. This isn't the first time Dave Grohl has ever done this before. The first Foo Fighters album was actually Dave Grohl really doing all the instruments there as well, with the exception of a few guest musicians I think had some parts added to that album as well, but it was primarily just Dave himself doing that album. So this isn't the first time Dave has done something like this. However, this track here sees Dave experimenting a bit more with things that he's never quite done before. If you watch the music video that accompanies this track, which I highly recommend you do, it starts off with 10 minutes or so of, kind of going into the process behind making the track, some in-studio stuff, as well as just kind of talking about music, experimenting with music, talking about kids, learning music, stuff like that. It's pretty interesting. I recommend you watch it. I know I don't typically talk about music videos in my reviews, but I do want to say that it is worth a watch. And then he's talking in there about how he, on this track, is not just doing, the drums and the guitars and all that stuff that he typically does, but he's also experimenting more with different forms of percussion on here that he's never really, done before on any recordings. And he's pretty much playing with a whole bunch of different sounds here on this track. He's experimenting with different instruments, different sounds, all that different types of stuff that he's never really played around with. And of course, some stuff that he has done before, some things that he's familiar with. He's really mixing all those up here on this track. Not only that, but this track is also, like I said, around 20 minutes in length, a little bit longer than that, in fact. And it's also an instrumental track. The only thing that Dave Grohl isn't really providing here on the song are any of his vocals. It's just a pretty long instrumental track where Dave is just kind of experimenting and he's just going about doing a whole bunch of stuff, really. And that, while it does sound a bit all over the place, it is pretty well put together, I would say, this track. There definitely is a structure to it. It's not like he went in the studio one day, played around with a bunch of instruments, recorded it, and just slapped it together and put it out there into the world. It's quite apparent that he put a lot of effort and time into making this track, especially when it comes to maybe the instruments he wasn't quite as familiar with, which he obviously took the time to learn and gain some skill with before obviously going out there into the world and releasing those recordings. And the music video itself kind of talks about learning about music, how it's like an a forever lasting process, even for seasoned musicians like Grohl, who have been at it for decades now. They're still learning new things, new ways to play their instruments, and even learning new instruments entirely. That's kind of how that whole intro part of the music video ties into the actual music itself. And I just found this to be a pretty interesting experiment overall. Play features a wide array of sounds that you're going to find on it. There's moments on here that sound a bit more aggressive, a bit more rocky, I guess you could say, something that you may expect to hear on like a Foo Fighters album, or some of the things that Dave Grohl has contributed to over the course of his career musically. It doesn't sound all too far removed from those, especially when it comes to the guitar playing. You could easily tell that it's Dave Grohl. Of course, you hear him in the Foo Fighters, and you can hear that translate here onto this track as well. It's clearly Dave playing it. The drums as well, of course. The guy's an insane drummer, and that just shines here on this track as well. He's using many different drum sets here as he kind of showcases in the video, and he is able to provide a lot of firepower when it comes to the more aggressive moments on this track. But kind of to balance out the more aggressive, more rocking moments on this song, there's also some more calming moments. Some moments that are a bit more, provide you a moment to breathe before maybe the track launches you back into some more very aggressive music. As you're listening to this track, you're not really going to find yourself bored because, even though it is a pretty long song and even though it's an instrumental, there's lots of interesting stuff going on. I know there's kind of, lots of people don't really care for tracks that don't have lyrics to them because, it's pretty easy to get attached to lyrics, to memorize lyrics, to follow along with lyrics. And when those are taken away from you, it's just kind of, to some people, this sort of free-form, massive instrumentation that's kind of hard to follow along with at times. But if you pay attention to what's going on here in this track, and you're going to want to, considering it's pretty interesting, pretty exciting, you're going to see, how this track develops and how it is a very, overall cohesive piece of music, not just Dave Grohl kind of jamming out for 20 minutes or so. This is clearly a piece that, while it features a lot of experimentation going on for Dave, it features him doing some new things. It's also, at the same time, well put together, I would say. There's definitely a flow to it, there's a structure to it, and it makes for a satisfying listen overall. Every time I would listen to this thing, there's new things I would pick up on, and I just found myself enjoying it even more with every repeated listen. Especially as I watched the music video for the track, which the way it's done in the video is it shows, a variety of, Dave's, I guess you could say, recording all their parts. Of course, it's using, different technology. So at times in the shot, you could see multiple Daves like in the same room. I know it's not any, crazy technology or anything like that. I know I've seen movies and shows that have done stuff like that before. But the way, I don't think I've ever seen a music video do it like this, where it has, the one musician who's playing all the instruments on the track, and it has, it's showing them, the same person, like maybe 4 or 5 of them in the same room playing these instruments at the same time. And of course, that's not the entire music video. Some parts of the music video also feature different shots, like, one will be off there, and the screen will split, and on the other side there'll be a different Dave playing a different instrument. And overall, I liked being able to watch this music video as well as along with listening to the track, because you get to see Dave at times pulling out those less familiar instruments, I guess you could say, those percussion instruments that he's not as familiar with, as he says in the earlier part of the video. And you really get while you're watching it, you hear those things a lot more than if you were just listening to the track on its own. If you just listen to this piece of music by itself, you may not pick up on some of those, more subtle things that Dave's doing a little differently on here than what you might expect on a Foo Fighters record. But when you're watching the video, you get to see all that happening right in front of you, and I think that was a pretty exciting thing through and through. Like I said, I know I don't typically talk a lot about music videos in track reviews or anything like that, but I feel like here they did a good job with this video, and I do want to shout that out. If there's any complaint I have with this track, it's that I am a little bit disappointed to some extent that we didn't get any of Dave's vocals here on this track, just because I feel like the guy has a pretty interesting voice, I guess you could say, how he's able to have, he's very aggressive screams, but also more restrained vocals as well. The guy's, he can do a lot with his voice, and especially given how this track, there's a lot going on in here. There's a lot of experimentation, lots of different things going on. I feel like adding the vocals in would have just been a whole nother, another instrument, if you will, being explored here on this track as well. I don't know, maybe there was a reason why they didn't want to add vocals to it. Maybe they wanted people to focus more on the instrumentation here in the track, which is certainly something that happened as a result of the lack of vocals. But still, I feel like I would have been interested in seeing what he would have done had he provided some vocals to this song overall. I feel like it could have been a little even more interesting than it already is. And then, like I said, that's not a major problem in my opinion. The track on its own is still pretty solid through and through, and I think it would have been interesting to see what that would have sounded like. But yeah, overall, I think that this is a pretty solid track in my opinion. I like the idea behind the track. I like some of the experimentation on display here. I like the fact that it is this pretty lengthy track, because I tend to like some longer songs. It's pretty enjoyable overall. I think it's definitely a lot more interesting than some of the more recent output from the Foo Fighters. I did review their last album. If you're curious on checking that out, I was kind of, I thought it was decent, but I wasn't crazy about it. This, on the other hand, is something that I am a lot more, excited to hear, just because there is a bit more experimentation going on, a lot more exciting things in here. Even if it is just Dave himself, it's not the Foo Fighters. There are some, Foo Fighters sounding moments in here, given that, Dave is in a big part of the Foo Fighters. It's an enjoyable track. If you're a Foo Fighters fan, if you're a Dave Grohl fan, you're going to want to check this out, because it will be interesting for you to hear. It's a fun listen. There's a lot going on here, and it's definitely something different than anything that Dave has done before on Foo Fighters records or any of his other projects or features on other projects by other artists. It's different. It's enjoyable. It's worth your time, and I definitely recommend watching the music video as well. It's only like an extra 10 minutes added to it with that whole opening part, like I said before, but it's worth watching. It's interesting. It sets up things nicely, and then it transitions into the actual song itself. And watching, all these Daves play all their instruments was pretty entertaining. Even for, a 20 minute long song, I was never bored watching the music video. It was a fun experience overall. So yeah, I would highly recommend this track. I definitely see myself returning to this song in the future. It's pretty entertaining. And yeah, with that said, that is just my own opinion. Feel free to have your own. In fact, feel free to leave it in the comment section down below. I would greatly appreciate seeing it down there. In fact, I may even respond to some comments, as long as you're not a jerk. While you're down there, make sure you also leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more music-related content, track reviews, album reviews, countdown lists, discussion videos, all that good stuff. If you don't want to miss out on it, make sure you subscribe. Thanks for watching, guys, and stay golden.